and welcome back to Say Yes to Chocolate podcast. I'm Dr. Becky, and this is Sara B.
And today, Dr. Becky, I'm so excited about today's episode because we're talking about something that seems so simple.
Yes.
But we just know from so many years in our wellness center that so many women are confused by.
And that would be what, Sara?
Bone scans.
Bone scans, the DEXA scan. Yes. What is it? What does it mean? What is those crazy numbers that come on the report? All that stuff.
Yes. What's the data and those numbers actually telling us?
What does it mean, right?
Yeah.
What do I do with it? I think you're right. A lot of times we'll hear, I got a DEXA scan, I got my T-score, and then I'm either good or I have osteopenia or osteoporosis, indication of, bone loss. But then what? What? Do I need to be scared? Do I need to go on medication? Do I need to start exercising? Do I need to take calcium supplements? Like what?
What?
Yeah.
But the question really is, what if that scan isn't telling us the whole picture of our bone health?
Yeah, because there's a drastic difference between bone quality and bone density. Density doesn't mean that you have good quality of bone, and good quality of bone doesn't necessarily mean that you have good density either. And really, at the end of the day, all we're really worried about is preventing fractures and making sure that your bones are healthy and resilient and strong. So that's what we're going to unpack today is how do we know that? How do we evaluate bone quality along with bone density to get a true picture?
And that is actually what we're going to talk about today. Is what is that difference between that traditional DEXA scan
Yes.
and some newer technology, the REMS scan.
Yeah. And really dive into why it actually matters more than you think, because the data you get out of a DEXA scan and then the data and the numbers that you get out of a REMS scan each have value, and it just gives you a way more complete picture of what is actually going on in that bone tissue, the whole umbrella of knowing a complete fracture risk.
So, Dr. Becky, can you kind of let's start with the DEXA scans because
Sure.
they haven't been going on in the U.S. since the 80s.
Yeah.
So what are they?
So you're right, Sara. DEXA scan, DEXA technology is essentially a specialized X-ray with radiation. The technology was developed in the late 80s, early 90s, and has become the gold standard. It's what most people are familiar with when it comes to bone health. And so the traditional DEXA scan uses low-dose X-ray technology, X-ray beam, to get a measure of bone density, essentially.
And so that's where people are getting and hearing the words like osteopenia, osteoporosis, T-scores,
Z-score, all of this stuff. Yeah, exactly. So let's get into a little bit of what those numbers mean. I'm going to deep dive a little bit. I kind of love some science, but I'm going to deep dive a little bit on how a DEXA scan actually works, and then the numbers we get out of it and how to interpret those, what those mean. So a DEXA scan, like I had just said, uses essentially a low-dose X-ray beam. And so if you envision, if you're on YouTube, you can see what I'm doing with my hands. But if you envision, you're laying down on a table. This is you laying on a table, and the X-ray beam goes through primarily 3 areas of the body. It's going to go through your lower back or your lumbar spine, and that's the lowest portion of your spine. And then it's going to measure both hips and 2 different sections of both hips. We're going to get the ball of our hip, and then we're also going to get the neck of our hip, if you will. And the reason those are the areas that are scanned is because if you fracture in one of those areas, it can lead to a significant loss of independence or quality of life. And there's actually a pretty high mortality risk if you especially break a hip. So we don't want you breaking in the spine. We don't want compression fractures in the spine. And then we also don't want you breaking a hip. And most people, if you're watching on YouTube, most people, if you break this area of the hip, the neck, the femoral neck, and that confuses people because we're not talking about our neck.
About this neck.
Yeah, we're talking about the femoral neck of our hip. This is the area that when you hear those horror stories about somebody breaking a hip, that's what we're talking about. So an X-ray beam gives us a 2D. It's basically like taking a picture, if you will. But the DEXA scan itself measures how fast that X-ray beam is allowed to go through the bone. The less dense it is, the faster it can penetrate, right? So this is kind of common sense. So then that bone mineral density raw number is converted into 2 scores, a T-score and a Z-score. And so the T-scores and the Z-scores compare your results against the average bone density of 2 different populations of people, okay? Yep. So Z-score is comparing you against the average bone density of people of your same age. We don't really use that a whole lot when we get older, it is reported on the DEXA scan, but it's actually more useful in younger people.
Sure.
Because we want to build up our bone bank, which is what we're going to talk about next.
Mm-hmm.
So a Z-score, if you have a DEXA scan and that's done when you're 20 or 25 for various reasons, if you have a lot of health complications, they're going to use a Z-score to compare you against a younger population. When you get older, like I said, we kind of throw a Z-score out. It's not as meaningful. And we use what we call a T-score. So the T-score is your bone mineral density compared to an average 30-year-old person. And a lot of people are surprised by that because what the heck, why are we comparing me at 55 or 60 or 65 years old to a 30-year-old, right? And it's because most people reach peak bone mass and quite honestly, peak muscle mass by about the age of 30. Mm-hmm. And so a T-score gives us how much bone loss you have likely lost since you reached your peak at the age of 30. And that's where we can then convert that into a diagnosis of either osteopenia, osteoporosis, or normal. So red, yellow, or green. That's kind of T-score in a nutshell.
Yeah, so that's so good. And I love how we are comparing ourselves to when we're at our peak.
Yes.
And so it's just giving us roughly a percentage of loss.
Yes.
Over how many ever years.
Yes. And so then on a DEXA scan, they'll take your T-score and it's typically reported to you in anywhere. It's an integer basically from like +4 to like -4. And you run somewhere along that gamut. Anything that's over 0, anything that's plus means that you have a higher bone density than the average 30-year-old, which is amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anything that's below or a negative number indicates bone loss of some kind. And at -1, we are osteopenic. Yeah. And at -2.5, we tip into osteoporosis range. And then on a DEXA scan, they will take your T-score and your health history of fracture, your age, health conditions, different medications that you're on, and they will compile all of that information and give you basically a fracture risk, if you will.
But that fracture risk they're only giving to you if you're still in osteopenia or normal bone density.
Yes.
Right? So as soon as we hit that osteoporosis, that -2.5, we no longer get that fracture risk.
No, and you just are a fracture risk.
You just are.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's basically a DEXA in a nutshell. So you get a bone density, convert it into a T-score, and then recommendations are made from that point.
Yep. So that information is so valuable. It gives us such a good insight.
And it's been the gold standard for a really long time.
For a very long time. But it's not really the whole picture.
No. And the reason we know that it's not the whole picture is because we will have people who have relatively decent bone density and they still have a fracture risk. Or they'll fall and, they shouldn't have fractured, right?
Right.
Or we will have people who will have osteoporosis or osteopenia go into an intervention of some kind, whether that is, medications or choosing to do supplements and exercise or using programs like osteogenic loading, which is what we do at our wellness center. And we will build bone density back, or we'll go from like a -2.8 osteoporosis back into osteopenia. And in theory, density has improved, right?
Correct.
Except depending on the way that bone was built, sometimes the bone is actually more brittle. Mm-hmm. It's more dense, but it's actually more brittle or less healthy or less flexible and is still more at risk to fracture. So over the years of doing DEXA scans and intervening and attempting to slow the rate of bone loss, or ideally building bone back, we have now realized that there's way more to the story.
Right, because DEXA scan is only measuring the density of the bone.
Correct.
Because it's not telling us how strong your bone is. It's not telling us how flexible your bone is.
No. How resilient they are. Like if you were to stumble and fall, how well you're going to bounce versus...
And we also have no idea what our actual fracture risk would be.
Right. It just doesn't give us the complete story.
No.
And that's actually where we can get either misled or just not have the complete story. And we just know over the last 2 or 3 decades that we're missing a key component to get a measure of true bone health. Because your DEXA scan is just a simple snapshot in time. And it's also 2D. So we don't get any information about what's actually happening inside of that bone. Only the outside cortical hard structure of what most people envision a bone is. And it also doesn't tell you if you are in the actively losing bone phase, actively building bone phase, or simply maintaining the current bone that you have. And one of the biggest limitations of DEXA is that you can only repeat them every 2 to 3 years to get a feel for how any interventions you're doing are working for you. And I mean, 2 or 3 years is a long time.
That's a very long time.
And if it isn't working or isn't working as well as it should be, or was working for the first 6 months and then stopped working, we have no way of knowing that.
Or if there's actually something else that's been, like, your body's fighting off, that's affecting your bone health, and you have no idea.
Or an undiagnosed medical condition or some medications that you're taking, you don't have any idea. And so there's just, it's the gold standard. There's a lot of great things about the DEXA scan, but there are some significant and serious limitations of the DEXA scan. And Sara, this really matters because what we actually care about isn't your T-score. It's not the data, it's not the numbers on a DEXA report. It's your true fracture risk and minimizing or hopefully eliminating your fracture risk altogether.
Yeah. Because as you already kind of talked about, that hip fracture is so life-altering.
It is. It's loss of independence, mobility, everything, and quite honestly, death. So it's a big deal.
So this is kind of the fun part. This is where, maybe it's not fun, this is where the REM scan is coming into play.
Yes, the new technology, the newest way to image the bone.
Yes, and the technology of it is so exciting.
Yes, because REMS doesn't use X-ray beam or radiation. REMS actually uses ultrasound technology, and I think everyone knows what ultrasound is. You know, that's what we use to visualize that baby, to monitor a pregnancy. And so it's really cool because ultrasound gives us a 3D image of a structure. So we not only can see the outside hard cortical, if you can see, if you're on YouTube, the ring of my hand, what I'm doing here, the hard outside cortical bone, we can also see what is going on inside the bone, because that inside of the bone is like a honeycomb structure called trabecular bone, but that's actually where we get a lot of the elasticity and flexibility of the bone. It also is where protein matrix is built, and that's where calcium and vitamin D and all of the minerals and nutrients to build new healthy bone is laid down. So we get the full component, the full structure of what that bone actually looks like, outside and inside.
Which is so amazing.
It's awesome.
It's just so awesome.
And that gives us a measure of two things. It gives us both bone density and bone quality. And that matters because that is a full picture of your bone health, which is fracture prevention or fracture risk.
Which is amazing. So we're not just counting bricks within inside the body. We're actually looking at how is that whole wall built.
Right, all the components, how those bricks have stacked up on each other, how well the mortar is setting, the quality of the mortar, all that stuff, and how strong that actual wall is. Not just the individual bricks and whether or not those bricks are good, strong, dense.
So what makes that REM scan so powerful is you can rescan more frequently. You can actually do them every 6 months, which means we can actually see if what we're doing, is it working? Is there something else we need to investigate? Do we need to double down on something? Do we need to make an adjustment? Because we can get feedback so much quicker.
Yes. Because of that 3D image, we can see so much more detail in real time of what's going on in that bone tissue.
To be able to see. Yeah.
Which is huge, Sara. And this is such a game changer because you can actually see if what you're doing right now is working or not working, or if we're missing a key component, or potentially if something is going undiagnosed. We've had that experience so many times.
Yes.
And if we're relying just on DEXA scan technology, sometimes we'll have people who have thyroid disease, but it's kind of what we call subclinical. So there's not overt symptoms necessarily. Or we'll have parathyroid disease, which is what regulates calcium in the body. And that a lot of times is completely asymptomatic.
So much.
And if we're relying only on DEXA scan, we've got 2 or 3 years of finding out we're not getting any results and we're missing a key component. And so this allows us to be able to determine if we're missing something or if metabolically you need additional nutrition interventions or additional supplementation or whatever it happens to be. It allows us to have that conversation so much sooner.
Yep. And then you can make those adjustments so much sooner. And how many times we had the conversation with people who are like, I wish I would have known sooner.
Absolutely.
Because I could have been making change. Because it kind of feels like then it's like I did all these things for 2 years.
Yes.
But this one big thing was missing.
Yes.
That we didn't know about until we get that next DEXA scan.
Yeah.
So with the REMS, we really eliminate that time gap.
Absolutely. And then we can say definitively, this is working, let's keep going.
Yes.
Or we need to tweak this just a little bit. You've gotten some decent results, but I think we can accelerate it. Or we're missing something. We need to deep dive because what you've been doing, we know works. So why aren't you getting results?
Yeah. What else is going on behind this story?
Yeah. And we see this all the time.
All the time. Okay. So Dr. Becky, here's the real question. And I think the question we get the most about REM scans is, if it's this amazing and we get such a better picture, why isn't it in my healthcare? Like, why isn't it a major medical?
Right. Why doesn't my doctor know about it?
Right. Yes.
So there's a few things at play there, but I'll just kind of hit the highlights. First of all, REM scans have been around for a long time over in Europe. They're actually in Italy and France and several different European countries. I know they're wildly available up in Canada at this point. And they are in several orthopedic clinics and medical clinics throughout the United States. A lot of them are on the East and West Coast. I think as in the Midwest can appreciate that. Technology typically comes to us last. But one thing, just the history of the REM scans, the technology really started to take off in about 2018, 2019, 2020. It was actually FDA approved in the United States. We all know what happened in 2020 then. That was COVID. Everything shut down, including a lot of progression with the government. And so the REMS kind of just took a back seat as far as like being integrated fully into the United States. But it's just a slow moving cogwheel. And the more clinics that pick up this technology and the more that it's being used and the more patients that take advantage of wanting this technology, the faster it's going to be incorporated. And I don't know that it's probably going to be much longer before it's just going to become gold standard, because it does give you such better information on your bone health and allows you to make much more educated decisions about your own health going forward. So that's kind of the history with the REM scans.
So we already talked about how we can rescan the REM scan and how we can do them, 6 months to a year. We can do them way more frequently than a DEXA scan. But like, what are we actually seeing inside the bone?
Sure. So ideally, you're going to see that the cortical bone on the outside has become more dense. That's that bone density. And because we can get that 3D image, you're going to see that trabecular bone on the inside. It's a honeycomb shape. And so you're going to start to see that the little holes of the honeycomb start to decrease. They start to decrease in size, indicating more flexibility, indicating just a healthier inner bone component. But let's just have a quick little science moment, if you will. Bone remodeling is slow, Sarah. It's probably one of the slowest tissues in the human body to regenerate and clear out, getting rid of the old and bringing in the new. So sometimes when you rescan, especially if it's within that kind of 6 month to a 1 year window, sometimes you can actually see your scores going down. I don't consider that a bad thing at all, because depending on the interventions you had been using or that you are currently using, things may shift negatively before we see an improvement. But the cool part about that is we know that it's good because we're still triggering bone remodeling, if that makes sense. You have the nutrients, you have the components for your bone to be responding to what you're asking of them. But your body might actually be clearing out old bone, icky, brittle, old, unhealthy bone tissue faster than you're building new bone tissue, because like I said, it's a slow process. So we might actually see that bone density or a T-score gets worse before it gets better. But because we're clearing out old in placing of new, your fracture risk is still improving. So even if your T-score is going down, your fracture risk is actually going down as well.
Yeah, which is what we want to be seeing.
It's all we want to be seeing. So we don't necessarily mind worsening scores, especially at the beginning, because your bone is doing exactly what it should be doing.
Which is also incredible, because just as you age, that process gets slower than it was before. And so just to be able to trigger that and have that happening, it's huge.
And it really is just an indication that your body is adapting to the environment in which you're placing it, which is exactly what it should be doing.
So Dr. Becky, what is one thing people should be doing after listening to this episode?
So Sarah, if you've had a DEXA scan, go look at your T-scores. Just get a really good feel for where you're at and then understand what those T-scores actually mean. And if you're confused about that, that's actually what we're covering next week. We're going to really deep dive into T-scores, what it means, the key takeaways, all that good stuff. So,
which is always such a good conversation.
It is. And it's so very rarely covered with people who get, you're basically usually told a number and not really have any conceptual idea of what that means.
If you're actually told the number. Yeah. Okay. So the bottom line is that DEXA scan is still valuable. It's still giving some good data, but that REM scan is giving us a complete picture. It's literally letting us see our whole bone health.
Yes. And Sarah, the goal is not to replace one with the other.
Yes.
It's to be informed and to be able to make better decisions about our body so that we know literally what's going on at a in-depth cellular level, essentially.
If you want to help understanding that your bone scan, and you are a member at our wellness center, we would love to help you go through that. So
we do that. Yeah. That's Sarah's love language.
That is my love language. Yes. So yes. So bring them in and we can help you with that.
Yes. Or if you actually want a plan that supports you in just aging strong, including your bone health, because it is foundationally important to age strong, that you have a strong foundation, which is your muscles and your bones. It's exactly what we teach in our Age Strong Energy Experience workshop. Yes. So there'll be a link in the show notes. We go into the 4 key components or key switches that we need to really focus on and prioritize as we get older: strength, stability, vitality, and recovery in that Age Strong Energy Experience, so that we can age well, age strong, stay fracture resistant, and just live our best life.
Because it isn't about fear.
No, there's enough fear mongering out there to last an eternity.
For an eternity. It's about building strength on purpose.
Absolutely, Sarah, 100%. And it's also about saying yes to your life, to your energy, your strength, and staying engaged and participating in this beautiful life.
There you go. That's it. So we hope this episode was valuable and you found some good tidbits.
Yes.
Please go ahead and give us a like.
Subscribe.
And hit subscribe. And also go ahead and comment with the muscle arm.
Strong emoji. If you made it all the way to the end of the episode, we'd love it if you would do that for us.
Yeah.
So until next time, Sarah.
Say yes to chocolate. Thanks for hanging out with us on Say Yes to Chocolate.
If today's episode gave you a win, something to think about, or even just a smile, we'd love it if you'd subscribe, rate, and share it with a friend.
Want more? Join our email newsletter so you don't miss a beat, and come find us on all the social channels at Say Yes to Chocolate Podcast for all the quick hints and tips.
And don't forget, you can always send us your questions or episode ideas. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, keep it simple, stay curious, and always say yes to chocolate.